The knock on the cabin door echoed like thunder in the stillness of the mountain morning. Jacob, a man who had left the noise of the city for peace, opened his eyes slowly, unaware that this day would rewrite his quiet life forever. His ranch-style cabin sat on private land outside the HOA's boundary, yet somehow, trouble had found him. Outside, a blonde woman in a crisp blazer stood tapping her foot, holding a key that clearly didn't belong to her. Her voice carried sharpness as she shouted, "This cabin is part of the community. Unlock the gate and let us in." Jacob frowned. He knew she was from the HOA, but this was impossible. His property deed proved his land was not theirs to control. Still, her confidence made him wonder what game was being played. She jammed the key into his gate's lock, twisting, but it refused to turn. Her face flushed red with frustration. Jacob didn't move, he just sipped his coffee from the porch and waited. Then came the words that cracked the calm, "If my master key doesn't work, I'll call the cops." "Let's see how you explain yourself then." Jacob's heart raced, not from fear but from disbelief. Why would an HOA leader think she could use a master key here? What secrets had been hidden about this community? What was she after? He didn't know then, but this would end with a shocking twist he could never have predicted, and so, the battle began, not over a gate, but over truth, power, and a phone call that would change everything. By noon, a police car rolled up the gravel driveway, crunching against the stones. 2 officers stepped out, adjusting their belts as they approached. Behind them, the HOA woman Karen folded her arms smugly, as if victory was already hers. "Sir," one officer began, "we've had a complaint. Apparently, you're blocking community access to property that doesn't belong entirely to you." Jacob leaned back in his chair. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he walked into the cabin and returned with a leather folder. Inside it lay the deeds, stamped and signed, showing clear boundaries of ownership. "This cabin, this land, this road," Jacob said, "none of it falls under HOA control. You're trespassing." Karen's eyes narrowed. She leaned toward the officers. "That can't be true. Our master key is supposed to open every gate in the area. His doesn't open because he's tampered with it." The officer studied the papers, brows furrowing. The silence stretched like a taut rope. Finally, the younger officer said, "These documents look legitimate." Karen's face hardened, but she refused to back down. "Call your wife," Karen snapped suddenly, turning her glare to Jacob. "Let's hear what she has to say. I bet she knows this is community land." Jacob froze. His wife, Emily, was out of town. She hadn't been involved in these disputes before. But the phone began to ring in his hand. And the screen flashed her name. Somehow, Karen had already contacted her. And as Jacob hesitated, Emily's calm voice answered, unaware of what was about to unfold. The officers stood silently as Jacob held the phone. Emily's voice, steady but curious, came through the speaker. "Hello? What's going on?" "Some woman just called me saying our cabin is in violation of HOA rules." Karen smirked triumphantly. She motioned to the officers as if she'd won. "See? Even his wife knows. Let's hear her admit it." But Emily wasn't easily swayed. "Violation of what rules?" she asked firmly. "This cabin isn't in their jurisdiction. We bought this land precisely because it wasn't under HOA control." Karen's smile faltered, but she quickly fired back, "If you're so sure, explain why our master key is designed to work on your gate." "It's part of our system." Jacob's knuckles tightened on the phone. Emily paused for a moment, then laughed softly, a laugh that cut through the tension. "That key doesn't belong here because the gate doesn't belong to you. Jacob installed it himself after the survey confirmed the boundary. If your key doesn't work, it's because it was never meant to." The officers exchanged glances. The younger one nodded slightly, impressed. Karen, however, turned pale before regaining her fury. "This isn't over. You can't just shut out a whole community. We'll take this to court if we must." Jacob looked at the officers, then back at Karen. "You're welcome to try," he said calmly, but inside, he knew this wasn't about a gate anymore. This was about control, secrets, And something buried deep within the HOA's history, and Emily, though miles away, had just stepped right into the storm. Karen stormed away from the porch, heels snapping against the gravel, her voice rising. You think a deed will save you? We've managed properties like this for years. The truth will come out. The officers lingered, uncertain. Jacob knew they couldn't arrest him, there was no crime here, but the seed of doubt had been planted. He turned back to his phone, Emily still on the line. Don't let her rattle you, she said gently. Remember what we discovered last year about the water rights? Jacob froze. Water rights. That was it. He remembered how their property map included not just the cabin and land but the natural spring feeding into the HOA's water system. He hadn't thought much about it. But now it clicked, Karen wasn't after his gate. She was after control of the spring. Karen glanced back at him, eyes sharp. Almost as if she knew he had realized the truth, Emily continued, they've been using that spring for their community supply, haven't they? That's why she thought her key would work, she assumed your gate was just another entrance to their system. Jacob felt the anger rise, but he masked it with calm. He looked at the officers. Gentlemen, if she insists on court, that's fine. But you should know, this HOA is already tapping into a resource they don't own. The older officer raised a brow. Is that true? He asked Karen. She froze, lips tightening, then turned away. For the first time, the power shifted. Word of the confrontation spread quickly. By evening, several HOA members gathered outside the gate, whispering, pointing fingers, unsure of what to believe. Karen stood in the center, rallying them with fiery words about community rights and illegal boundaries. Jacob stayed calm, leaning on the porch rail as Emily spoke through the speakerphone, her voice amplified enough to carry. Neighbors, you've been misled. The HOA doesn't own this land. They don't own the spring. My husband and I do. And the only reason they're fighting is because they built their system on something they never controlled. The crowd murmured. Doubt grew like cracks in a wall. One man asked Karen directly. Is that true? Have you been using their water without telling us? Karen's face stiffened, but no denial came. The silence said enough. Jacob stepped forward, holding up the deed again. This isn't about keeping you from your homes. This is about honesty. You deserve to know the truth. The officers, still present, nodded. The younger one even muttered, looks like you've got the law on your side. Karen's shoulders slumped, but her eyes still burned with determination. You may have won today, she hissed, but I'll find another way. Jacob met her gaze steadily. Not while we stand together. But inside, he knew this war was just beginning. Over the next week, the HOA board scrambled. Letters were sent, meetings were held, threats disguised as official notices appeared in Jacob's mailbox. Each time, Emily read them aloud over the phone, her voice calm, steady, and filled with resolve. They're trying to wear us down, she said. But they've underestimated something important. This land has history, and the law protects it. Karen, however, wasn't ready to surrender. One afternoon, Jacob returned home to find surveyors pacing near the property line, claiming they were rechecking boundaries. But when confronted, they admitted quietly the HOA had hired them to find loopholes. None existed. That night, Emily called again. Her voice steady but emotional. Remember why we bought this cabin? It wasn't just for us. It was for peace, for freedom. Don't let them take that away. Jacob stood at the window, looking at the quiet lake glowing under the moon. The golden retriever lay peacefully at his side. He knew Emily was right. This was more than a fight with Karen. It was about preserving everything they had built together, and when the final showdown came, it would be Emily, not Jacob, who delivered the line that ended it all. The day of the HOA's emergency meeting arrived. Karen stood at the front, trying to rally her board, insisting the cabin was theirs to manage. But then, Jacob's phone rang. He put it on speaker, and Emily's clear voice filled the room. This isn't about keys or gates, she said firmly. It's about honesty. You built your authority on lies, and now everyone sees it. Our land is ours. Our spring is ours. And if you want to test that in court, we'll be waiting with every document, every witness, and every truth you've tried to bury. The room fell silent. For the first time, Karen had no words. The board members shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had been misled. Jacob smiled faintly. The officers, present once again, nodded in quiet approval. Emily's voice carried the final blow. You thought your master key could open every door. But the one door you'll never open is ours. Karen lowered her head, defeated. The battle was over. Jacob ended the call, standing tall. For the first time, peace truly returned to the cabin, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.